Welcome to the People by People podcast with me, your host, Laura Sutherland. I am very pleased to be bringing Simon Francis as a guest to kick off the 2021 podcast series. Simon is a founding member of Campaign Collective and also the past chair of the PRCA. Welcome to the show, Simon.
Tapale, Biliana Laura.
Ah, very good, very good. And what does that mean for everyone that's listening in?
Thank you and Happy New Year.
Ah, Happy New Year to you too. Did you have a nice time off?
I did, thank you. Yeah, it was lovely.
I think we first met via PR Fest, am I right?
Yeah.
Yes, because that would have been about 6 years ago. Ever since then, I remember you were talking at the one in the ECCI, the Edinburgh Centre for Carbon Innovation, about social impact, and it really got me thinking about the impact that we have in society, the wider impact that we have in all the work that we do, and that really kind of comes back down to purpose, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like social impact can have like a massive array of kind of facets, whether it's looking at your supply chain and using social enterprises through that. And a campaign that we've done this year with the PRCA Council is creating a directory of suppliers that people can use to improve, increase their social impact. But also, I think importantly, it's looking at the impact that we have on our audiences. I think there's, kind of a really kind of strong message in ensuring that, do no harm. Nothing you do as a communicator should be harmful to anybody else. And that might seem like quite an easy sentiment for everyone to get behind. But it is still something that I think our industry struggles with sometimes, because I think there are differences of opinion when it comes to ethics and standards and where you draw the line on things. But I think, and what indeed harm means. So it opens up quite a lot of interesting discussions and debates whenever it comes up.
I know, but also as well, I think from a, either consultant agency point of view, or even if you work in-house, I think it's our duty as practitioners to ensure that we are trying to steer these businesses and organizations in the right direction to make sure there's a positive impact on society, essentially, and the societies that we operate in, live in, work in, essentially, as well. Do you think that should be part of the PR role?
Well, again, yeah, it stresses as you I think as you've talked about a lot before, Laura, it's about the power of consultancy and the fact that PRs are not just the people who push out a press release, or shouldn't be just the people who push out a press release. They're the people who actually can have a massive impact on the businesses, because they're the people who are closest to the audiences, especially now as more and more of us are, kind of social media and community outreach and stakeholder engagement is all part of the work that we're doing. We're the ones who hear the reactions to what our clients are saying and doing, and we need to have that. We need to be listened to, and we need to have that voice in the room that kind of will say to clients, no, you're going down the wrong route. No, this is what's going to work best for our audiences, and to put them first. Yeah,
I think social conscience, and there's definitely depending who you speak to, there's always people that think, well, that's not the role of public relations, but I think that public relations has to be part of that conscience and part of that heartbeat of the business, the organization, that really steers that part of it. Because I mean, for talk's sake, if you're a factory, and one of my former clients, a factory in a very small part of Glasgow, but employed many local people. So actually they were giving job opportunities, but at the same time, their CSR that they were working on actually gave back to the community as well at specific points in the year. So to some of the schools, to some of the church groups and things like that. And I think that's where, benefiting society and like having a real positive impact is a great thing for them.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, some of the work I was doing kind of at the end of last year with Social Enterprise Scotland around the launch of a new directory to help people buy gifts that give back from social enterprises. It sparked a lot of conversations about kind of what is a social enterprise, and can kind of some of the small businesses, especially in rural areas, take part, and how can they take part? Because they are the heartbeat of communities. They're the ones that are sponsoring the football clubs. They're the ones that are providing kind of jobs to local people. And that I think is a really important point, that kind of social impact isn't the preserve of charities, isn't the preserve of registered social enterprises. It is the preserve of kind of everyone. We all live in a community.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things I was working on for PR Fest, when redeveloping the idea and the model, and you're part of the steering group for that, thank you. But part of what made me really want to review it was this idea of what is the desired impact of being a really brilliant practitioner. Yes, it's to protect reputation, and yes, it's to build trust, but really, if you look at the nuts and bolts of it, and if I think about like what I want out of working as a practitioner, like I want like a really almost like an end-to-end approach, like when I started to work with the clients, right through to following through the impact of my work, and that essentially is going to end up out in a community, is it not? And I think people need to really think about stuff like that. And it took me a while to get my head around, the wording, and but I think we can really benefit people and societies in which we work, and I think that is a really powerful thing for us to be able to hang our hats on. And also coming back to that old argument of what's the value of PR? How many times have we had that conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think that is where, the social value of PR needs to be increasingly kind of understood, and needs to be increasingly considered in terms of what we do. And as I say, that is through through the supply chain, through the work that we do, but also the the idea that we also have a massive duty when it comes to the environment and looking after our own impact, and also, as you say, advising our clients on the impact that they have there.
Yeah, totally. Which actually leads in nicely to obviously this is the sort of theme for our conversation today, but something we've been talking about was the ad industry's new net zero commitment, and how the PR industry needs to follow suit. But do you think that we should follow Adlan's campaign, or do you think that we need our own campaign?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I was brought on to in September into the sort of Ad Net Zero steering group, to provide kind of a view from the PR and communications sector. And I mean, I think that the model that they've developed is absolutely appropriate to the PR profession. I think obviously some of the kind of the language that they use, and perhaps some of the metrics that they're going to be looking at are perhaps kind of more geared towards advertisers. But I think there's a couple of reasons why I think we should sort of follow kind of what's been developed so far. The first is because it's a working model. It's based on an industry where agency work predominates, like similar to us. Many kind of operating styles are kind of similar and shared. But also increasingly, as PRs, we are in control of ad budgets. Increasingly now that is part of our job, especially when it comes to social media, and therefore we are part of the advertising industry, whether they like it or we like it or not. We are doing advertising through our day-to-day job. So even if we develop something separate, we would then still have to adhere to this one too, because we're part of that sector. So I think it has some areas, and I think we'll probably talk about some of those where it could be interpreted better for the PR industry. But I think it's a sound model and starting place.
Yeah. So what's the plan for that then? Just anything that has been approved that you can talk about?
At the moment, there's no sort of fixed plan as to how we're going to roll this out through the industry. At the moment, it's sort of a voluntary code that the PR industry can sign up to. You can go onto the AdNet Zero website. You can sign up to it. we have done, kind of some limited activity in promoting it to the membership of the PRCA and to the wider community. We haven't really brought in other kind of industry bodies as yet. We haven't talked to, kind of PR Fest, and I know that there's a lot of people in the steering group who are keen on this area. So there is a kind of a lot of work that needs to be done to sort of bring all of the passion and the energy around achieving net zero in our industry together. But that, I think, is something for this year. And I think we need to sort of work through how we're doing and how we're going to do that. But yeah, I think there's nothing set in stone as yet.
Okay. So I think one of the challenges is that we always have is enforcement, and if we can't enforce something, then how do we call it bad practice? What do we think for the industry we could do to encourage people to sign up to something like this, or to create their own? Because I think there's, I suppose it's kind of very similar to, people kind of saying that they're doing diversity and inclusion things because they've got a policy, or they've talked about talked a good game. But how do you think we can enforce this type of thing if we do get something up and running?
I mean, I think this is absolutely one of the major areas that needs to be discussed, because I think, with all of these things, we've had it this year with ethics of PR and kind of other issues that have come up through the council. People have talked about kind of how important it is to sign up to industry bodies and industry codes and things like that. But you can't enforce you can't force that on people. It's all voluntary. So you kind of either have to go through the point of view of massive campaigns to businesses and to procurement professionals, and stress that you can't hire people, and be bold about the language. You shouldn't, and you probably can't hire people who are not signed up to this code of conduct, and you have to be confident about why it's so important to be part of that code of conduct. And you have to sort of show the agencies that if you don't sign up, you're going to be left behind. Questions are going to be asked about you, and you're probably not going to win the business. That's what's going to drive people to sign up, and you have to be quite kind of bold about that campaign. Kind of doing it as a
doing best practice and the successes of those that have done to encourage more then.
Yeah, that's part of it. But I think there's been sort of, as I say, I think there's been too much sort of people have been too nice about these codes of practice, I think, in the past, saying like, yeah, people will do it because it's the right thing to do, or people will do it because they'll see the business benefits of being part of a code of practice. Well, not if it costs you money, then people are going to say, well, do we want to pay however many £1,000s to join this, or do we not? Or do we want to do, is that going to have any detrimental effect on the business if I don't do it? Well, basically what happens is, as we've seen this year in terms of ethics, you have practitioners who are operating outside of that, operating outside of good procurement processes, which have been some of the headlines recently with the PR industry, and they damage all of us.
Yeah.
So I think the time for sort of saying, look at the business benefits and if this is the right thing to do is over. I think we kind of need to be a lot bolder. I think we need to work with people like with the CBI. I think we need to work with government and procurement there to really stress that this isn't kind of a nice to have. This isn't something that you should be doing and thinking about every now and then. This is something that should be part of your everyday life. And I think that it's only through that we will avoid mandatory regulation. I mean, because that's then the ultimate, and the thing everyone I think probably wants to avoid is we don't need any more red tape. We don't need any more of government telling us to fill in this form and that form. And we've got enough forms to fill in now with Brexit, thanks to all the letters that we're getting from HMRC every other week. We don't need any more forms to fill in from government, but what we do need is to make sure that that we are adhering to rigorous standards and best practices as an industry.
Yeah. And I think there could be a sort of element to, I'm always kind of thinking like, how can we visually demonstrate that to people that are struggling to understand, and maybe some sort of how the Global Alliance has the capability framework. Maybe we have to start thinking about using that type of thing, because that's more about skills. but maybe we have to start working in the sort of must-haves for like the I suppose values, essentially, you know, where we've got diversity, inclusion, where we're talking about you know, social impact, sustainability, and all that type of stuff in there as well. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you know, the whole uh, sustainability isn't just obviously about the environment. It does kind of cover a whole load of other areas. You know, again, some of the work done with the council is looking at you know, where are the impacts that the industry has in terms of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and I think we do need to sort of look at it as a wider piece.
Yeah. Yeah, I think bringing everything together would be a great idea, and it might be in collaboration, as you say, with other organisations or bodies, etc. You know, like the Global Alliance, for starters, because they've already got that framework sitting there. And if there was something additional for, let's say, non-skills based stuff, like the, you know, the agency of the future, or the team of the future, that would be amazing to have something like that in there, because it would then bring together everything we've been talking about and continue to evolve, I suppose, as we evolve in society and as our roles evolve as well, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because I think you know, it's a conversation that we're having at Campaign Collective at the moment. I mean, we're 5 this year, and we kind of are sort of challenging ourselves to think about kind of, you know, what is the next 5 years going to look like. And I think, you know, when we started, we were kind of, you know, one of the few agencies that adopted a remote working model from the start. Now that's sort of become kind of commonplace. We kind of we've lost one of our USPs, so we kind of need. But well, when we say that, but one of the things that we were talking about though is, and I think this links in absolutely into the operations part of the ad net zero. If you know, we know the carbon savings from working from home, they're sort of well established. There's figures about all of that. But if you were being really true to kind of achieving net zero, or, you know, without having to do any offsetting, then the shift that we've seen in 2020 towards working from home shouldn't be a temporary thing. You shouldn't be trying to rush back to any office. It should be permanent.
Yeah.
That is how you reduce your carbon footprint, by not having an office, by not having people commuting into a city centre or town centre. But the cost of that, though, to your employees and to your staff is huge, because they're having to pay increased electricity bills, they're having to pay increased fuel bills, you know, and you know that you've also got to consider about their kind of way of life. So, you know, the money that you're saving from your office shouldn't just be kind of, you know, going into the, you know, the P&L, and everyone's happy about your profitability is boosted, and it should be going to your staff.
Yeah.
They might, we're going to pay all your electricity bills, we're going to pay all your phone bills, your Virgin, you know, your Sky bills, everything, because we want you to work from home, and we're going to then find innovative new ways of bringing people together to try and create the office culture that we know is so important, especially for junior members of staff who need to have kind of a sense of mentoring and support from people. So that's where we need to focus our energy, rather on thinking about going back into city centres.
You know, I mean, it's so true, and it's I've been talking since April about reimagining the whole. Everyone's businesses need reimagined right now, because there's an opportunity. You know, whether it's an opportunity through challenges and negative things happening, or an opportunity because there are quite clearly positive things hitting you in the face, there's definitely an opportunity here for every business and organisation to be thinking exactly about that. My worry is that, especially for some of the agencies who are driven by the traditional way of doing things, is going to hold things up. It's going to make other people, because, you know, let's face it, like when people see bigger agencies doing stuff, they tend to try and follow suit. And I think that, you know, smaller agencies or agile businesses in public relations and communication have that opportunity right now to actually be the ones to be leading the way on that. Because they can make quicker decisions, they can consult quicker, they can turn things around quicker. but also they are probably more than likely be the ones that are going to believe in that more than some of the bigger corporates and worldwide networked agencies, for example. I'm just casting my mind back to a few weeks back on a Zoom meeting where a leader of a well-known agency said, in fact, maybe 3 of them echoed the same thing, said, I can't wait to get everyone back into the office next year. And I said, can I just, stop everyone there? Like, why are you saying that? Have you not taken this time to think about X, Y, and Z? And they said, no, we want people back in the office.
And I think, and this comes to the yeah, absolutely. When we set up, we kind of were sort of kind of thinking back about previous experiences, and we sort of started off by saying, right, every decision that we make is going to be the opposite of what we were told or what was expected of us when we worked in big agencies, and that led us to some interesting decisions. But I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're a social enterprise, and we don't have we've written out the profit motive, because that kind of was what we were told to do. But I think now, if people were thinking about setting up or thinking about kind of how do they change, they go, well, if you wanted to put the environment or your social impact of your company first, that's your overriding priority. Yes, you're going to have to make money. You have to make profit. You can't have a social impact without profit. Without money coming through the door. You've got to be a well-run organization. But if you're putting social impact and environmental impact first in your decision making, then you don't rush everyone back to the office. You can't.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's really good food for thought for people for the start of this year, and also coming up to the sort of end of March, when things will be, budgets are changing and stuff like that. I think people really need to think carefully about this. And it's something that I would hope that we're still talking about through the year to reinforce that.
It cuts through like so much of our lives. Like, I mean, and if you go through the Ad Net Zero process, the bit around media choice, so they're developing a platform so you can tell the carbon and footprint and the environmental impact of the media that you're placing your advertising spend with. Well, we can use that tool to understand which media are we favoring if we're giving exclusives. If I have to choose between which national am I going to give a really good story to, I go on there and I check that this group have got an awful track record compared to this group. Well, I give it to them. Obviously, you have to think about your audiences first still, and make sure you're going to reach the people you need to reach. But it could, if we're really taking this seriously, it could lead to questions about our supply chain, about our media placement, obviously, about our production. I think another strand of the Ad Net Zero, which is huge, is awards and events. I mean, I hate awards ceremonies. I hate, I'm just delighted I've now got a kilt and I can just turn up in that, because it takes away the kind of the need to wear one of those horrendous dinner jackets. But
the advantage of being a Scotsman.
Exactly, yeah, and I've now got the smatterings of enough Gaelic to pull it off as well. So, but you can't, the idea that people are going to start flying around the world to award ceremonies, I think that's going to be a massive challenge for the agents, especially for those big agency leaders that you were talking about, who love their annual trip to Cannes, or kind of love getting dressed up to these events, and also for the industry itself makes a lot of money out of events. Both in terms of wider sectors that we work for and we represent, but also in terms of you think about the business models of the media publishers, Haymarket and people like that. A lot of it is underwritten by quite significant amounts of event spend.
Which then comes back to the point again that they should have taken this opportunity to reimagine their whole business.
And if they haven't, then I think they
not just stick plasters over areas where they think, oh well, we can just hold out until events come back again. But actually, if you look at the wider picture of the conversation we've just had, that isn't going to solve any major problems that we need to be solving. And anyone listening to this, I would urge you to go away and really deeply think about this, because and if you need to speak to Simon, then I'll put obviously his details in the show notes, and obviously feel free to get in contact with me as well. But yeah, this is a massive area that we need to be looking at. We need to be actively making better. And I don't see massive amount of encouragement coming from those big, big media houses and the big agencies at the moment. I think they've been so caught up with diversity and inclusion in 2020, reviewing policies, reviewing like their sort of pay gaps, and the wider scope of things, that these things are slipping through the net at the same time. But again, maybe if there was some sort of wider framework we could draw and develop that is alignment with, the skills guide for, global capabilities from Global Alliance, but we match in these things as well, that would probably be a really great thing to have, and it'd be a really good guide for anyone that's working in public relations, running a business in public relations, or a supplier to public relations businesses, essentially, as well.
Yeah, and I think that on the other hand, I mean, there's a risk, isn't there, that kind of this last few months has been kind of reputation damage to the industry around kind of some of the procurement stuff, but kind of previously around kind of the diversity, and next year the attention is going to be on the UK through COP, and I think. Anyone who's thinking, and I'm sure all clients are thinking about, right, and agencies are thinking about what we're going to do about COP. Well, that's great, but unless you've got your own house in order, you shouldn't be doing anything, because it'll be very easy for people to pick you apart. Kind of a big event sponsored by whoever, but then, oh, what's this? Their chief executive's got a private jet.
Yeah.
Or kind of the number of cars that the kind of head of an agency's got that's sponsoring some talk at COP. It's just the sort of the stories that could come out could be just as damaging for the sector as some of the ones recently on procurement. And I think we've got to really think carefully about it. 2021 should be, and COP being on our doorstep should be even more of a reason to actually take it seriously and to start thinking about it this year more than ever.
Yeah, so for those who are listening in, COP was supposed to take place in Glasgow in 2020, but moved to 2021. COP being where the global leaders in government and policy and communication all come together. So we know that Biden's coming to Glasgow in November. It's the 1st to the 12th of November. I was involved in COP21 through my work with Scotland's 2020 Climate Group, and in those days you couldn't attend or be part of the official event, but we were working on a strategy which basically would have hosted a fringe event, and we would have had representation by an official from the Scottish Government within the delegation attending the event. There's been so much drama the last few years between Brexit, independence, the coronavirus, Trump, now Biden, everything's happening in Glasgow. Do you think that they will be going for another level of agreement, Simon?
I think that might be above my pay grade. I don't know. I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, I think a new US president is going to want to do something. I think the post Brexit kind of reality will mean that the EU and the UK will be looking for something that kind of can show the seeds of unity rather than division. So I think they'll probably want to go for something big. Whether they'll get it, I think will depend on. I think as always with these negotiations, it comes down to what's the deal with kind of more developing economies.
Yeah.
And I think there's the big thing that I think probably has changed though to a certain extent is I remember having a discussion when I was in Ethiopia at a conference, and one of the delegates there was I was mentioning the fact, well, I feel a bit guilty about having come out here And they said to me, well, why? We want you to be here. We want to sort of hear from your experiences. And you've enjoyed centuries of being able to travel around the world, go to conferences and hear from the best speakers, and kind of network with people. Why are you now denying our businesses the opportunity to do the same? I think now, obviously, what's changed is the fact that people are more used to doing things online. So we hopefully might see kind of the fact that you can create kind of more business opportunities for organisations in developing economies without the need for international travel. I think if COP was being really brave, though, they wouldn't have a physical event at all, would they? They would do it virtually.
I think that's the thing, because if you look at Greta, when she was traveling and doing her sort of world tour, people were actually praising the way that she actually went about doing it. But I can quite imagine the Air Force One's just going to take off from the States and then land in Glasgow. There will be a dramatic impact on that, and I hope that they've started to think about that, because that's obviously one of the first things that press will pick up on as well.
Yeah, I have a horrid vision that Boris Johnson might decide to cycle up. That's happens. You heard it. It's not because I don't know how I can now strongly try and dissuade the government from running that as a PR idea. I think no, I think you're absolutely right, and I think kind of going back to kind of discussion before, as a response, kind of as an industry, our clients are going to be wanting to do things at COP. The organisations we work for are going to be wanting to do things at COP. They're going to be wanting to do events. Our job is probably to say to them, how do we create an event that has zero carbon footprint? And that's that's
yeah,
going to
I think there's also as well that people need to be realistic. It's not like there's an unlimited amount of event space, for exhibition space and all the rest of it. I think if for example, if our industry is to collaborate, then I think that our industry should all be coming together to do something together. And pulling together, not just from a collaborative point of view, but also so that there is more of a share of voice there than just one organisation or two organisations, and it will make better use of that space and that time. But can you imagine how many organisations are going to want to do something around it, and the noise that's going to be around it is going to be unbelievable. It's how are people going to cut through?
Well, it's like when you go back to the Olympics, in terms of the amount that of media attention that is going to likely be on COP this year, and it's the environmental equivalent of the Olympics in that respect. And I remember back in 2012 doing a blog series about the most ridiculous PR stunts of the day, and and it was every day there was just so many to pick from.
Yeah.
It was horrendous, from the kind of the waste of energy and time. I think, if we're going to do something at COP, you've got to do something collaborative, you've got to do something meaningful, and you've got to do something big. It's that old expression, go big or go home. I mean, and if you're not going to do any of those things, then you're not going to get any real cut through. You're going to feel better about yourselves, but you're not going to get any cut through in terms of the media and in terms of the public attention. And you probably won't get any cut through in terms of the impact that you eventually have anyway. From
our point of view, from PR and communication, I think that we've talked about this at PR Fest before, a number of times. Betsy Reed did a bit on sustainably communicating and sustainable communication. And it was really interesting because people don't necessarily think about how to sustainably communicate. They just think about what the message is. So let's talk about sustainability. How many trees have we planted, and what have we done to offset this? But actually, it's as much about the mechanism at the same time. But I think that not only is that true, but again, coming back to the sort of value of a public relations or the public relations role within an organisation, public relations practitioners should be advising around, all the stuff we've just talked about, around sustainability, around social impact, around offsetting, around alternative ways to do things, and making sure that, and because it all comes back to purpose, making sure that also comes back to the organisational goals that it sets specifically around that as well.
Yeah, and if you don't if you don't consider that bigger picture, then, as I say again, your message is going to get lost. I think what you were saying about collaboration is absolutely key. I think increasingly in the charity and not-for-profit sector where I predominantly work, we see a lot more of that. And we see a lot of organisations coming together, whether it's sort of tackling fuel poverty, whether it's dealing with hate crime online. I think that sort of culture of collaboration it's taken a long time for the sector to get there, but I think now is far more used to it. And I think that's a lesson I think for other sectors to think about and learn, and the kind of collaboration and working together. And I suppose this goes back to the point right you made right at the beginning, Laura, just around kind of should we be doing our own framework or should we be looking at the Ad Net Zero one, is actually the point that it's only by working together that we can have kind of a real profound impact on this. And so I'd urge again, I suppose, collaboration and to ensure that we're working together to have the maximum impact.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I think that kind of nicely rounds up that conversation, but it's certainly not the last, I hope, of the conversations we're going to be having around this from the podcast. But thank you so much for your time, Simon, especially at this time of year. It's really busy, lots of plans being made. Really excited to get into a new year and to have these positive conversations for positive action and positive change.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been great. It's been really enjoyable. But as I say, and we haven't even talked about misinformation of and in the context of climate change at all yet. So that's a whole new podcast that you need to do.
You're absolutely right. And there's a reason for that, but that will all be revealed soon. So thanks again, Simon, for being a fabulous guest. Thank you to you all listening and tuning in. Please do remember to subscribe so that you manage to get this into your app every time I release a new episode, which I plan on doing every couple of weeks. And also, if you want to leave a review, I'd be really grateful, because it's great for other people to read what you think of the podcast and what your experience was of it. But for now, thanks so much again, and I will be back to you in a couple of weeks' time.